Standards-based grading is going to be discussed by Kenneth Martin. Within the last 10 years, grading has become a hot topic. Principals, teachers, administrators all want to make sure that students are being graded properly, grades are being reported to parents, and everybody is on the same page. So in order to get to this point, as a nation, we decided to develop some standards. In the early 2000s, states started developing learning standards for elementary and high school students. The standards varied from state to state. So in order to get more equivalent standards between states, in 2009, there was a Common Core Standards Initiative. This initiative was developed in order to create standards that were more equivalent from state to state. The driving force behind this movement was to make sure that students would be prepared for post-secondary education and also to enter the work world. So between the years of 2009 and 2010, a group of experts, which consisted of Council Chief State School Officers, National Governors Association, teachers, and content experts, and they developed what was called the Final Common Core Standards. These standards ended up being accepted by 42 states. Now, the question comes about, why standards-based grading? What's wrong with how we're doing things now? Traditional grading has just been the way students have been assessed for years and years. And there's so many different things that come into play with traditional grading besides what the actual student knowledge is. So you have these letter grades, A, B, C, D, F, and these can be very misleading. And teachers have a responsibility to ensure that grades are accurate reflections of what students have learned and not rewards for attendance or cooperative behavior. When standards for grading are meaningful, transparent, and fair, grades can support rather than label the learning process. A, B, C, D, and F are labels. A student can have a grade between a 70 and 80 and not really understand the standard, not really reach the standard, but they're going to be pushed along because they have a passing grade. And this is only hurting that student because they're only going to be more lost in the next phase of education. The Every Student Succeeds. This has been adopted to replace the No Child Left Behind Act. And there's actual laws now that hold schools accountable for student success. Schools are not allowed to fail students that are not grasping the material and move on regardless. So they have multiple opportunities to show proficiency. And this is kind of the basis or the backbone for standards-based grading, is multiple opportunities. Don't punish a student because they don't grasp the material. Give them more opportunities. And once they prove that they can reach that standard and show proficiency, then they can move on. Now, standards-based grading is not just a walk in the park. There's some work that comes to it, and most of this work, unfortunately, falls on the teachers. they have a very tough job ahead of them if they're going to change from traditional grading to standards-based grading. Some things they're going to have to do is tailor all of their work around the standards. This may be something that they have not done at all. So it will take time. And the tests they've been giving, the assessments, they may have to modify these and change them to make sure that they directly relate to the standards. And there also has to be consistency amongst the teachers in how achievement is measured. Now, these things may be difficult, but through teacher collaboration, it can be a success. That's the reason behind professional learning communities, is so teachers can have that dialogue and talk about these issues and work together to tailor their work around the standards and modify the tests and come to an agreement of what achievement looks like, what proficiency looks like for each standard. Now, in order to study if standards-based grading has an impact on education, there has to be a research question. The research question for this experiment is, does standards-based grading have an impact on student achievement? Now, when looking at this research, you have to figure out what kind of research design fits this kind of experiment. So with the hypothesis being that standards-based grading does have a positive impact on student achievement. So when looking at this hypothesis, you're going to have to select a sample population. All right, and sample population would be students. These students are in classes. All right, they're in different classes in different schools. The more students that are measured, the more accurate the results will be. And it's just impossible to randomly select the sample population. And because you can't randomly select the population, it leads the researcher to using quasi-experimental design. And the exact kind of quasi-experimental design would be the non-equivalent comparison group design. And within this design, you have a control group and an experimental group. The control group are the students that are receiving traditional grading. The experimental group are the students that are receiving standards-based grading. Within both of these groups, they will both receive a pre-test and a post-test. The pre-test will be able to show the baseline for a student's knowledge beginning the unit. The post-test would be some sort of end-of-course test that will be able to show where their knowledge is at the end of the unit of study. Now, data, very important. Okay, the data that's going to be collected will be the pre-tests and the post-tests from all the different students in these classes. Researchers have a daunting task ahead of them when evaluating the data. But what they need to do is they can run what's called a t-test to look at the data. And what a t-test does, it will help determine whether there was a statistically significant difference between the groups on the variable of interest. Now, and the pretest is a very important piece to this design because it does show where the students start from, because each student is unique. The variables in this experiment would be student achievement. Student achievement would be the dependent variable. And the independent variable would be the instituting of standards-based grading. How are these variables related? Is there a causal relationship? Now, when conducting quasi-experimental design, there are going to be possible threats to validity. Because there is no randomization in selecting sample population, this could definitely lead to a bias because of student prior knowledge. Different classes, different students, different schools. These students starting this unit of study may have completely different backgrounds leading up to starting the study. And that's why the pretest comes into play. It kind of helps lessen this threat because you can see where they started from. Another threat to validity would be the teachers. Some teachers are just more effective instructors. They reach the kids more. Maybe they prepare more. The students may respond to them. This could definitely threaten validity. Another threat would be the selection maturation. And what this means is throughout the unit of study, some students may become bored, disinterested, and just basically tune the teacher out. This is going to affect their post-test. That's a definite possible threat to validity. Another threat to validity would be the selection regression threat. This occurs when different groups are from different populations. There may be some high schools that have many high achieving students starting out. Other high schools may have lower achieving students starting out. This is yet another threat to validity. In conclusion, I do think it's possible to through research figure out if standards-based grading does have a positive impact on student achievement. But it is going to be a process to figure this out. It's going to take time. It's going to take some dedicated researchers. But if the experiment is carried out the right way, I do think that the results will be clear about whether standards-based grading affects student achievement. This is Kenneth Martin. Thank you for listening. And I'm going to show you the references. Have a good day.